On the 17th of April, 2020, acclaimed singer-songwriter Fiona Apple released her first studio album in 8 years, Fetch the Bolt Cutters. To put it gently, a lot of people like this album. It won the Grammy for Best Alternative Music Album, and the track Shameika won the Grammy for Best Rock Performance. It was named the Best Album of 2020 by 13 different outlets that Wikipedia considered worthwhile enough to list, including the New York Times, Consequence of Sound, Forbes, who apparently do music, and Pitchfork. Pitchfork would also give the album the first 10 out of 10 rating in a decade, with Jen Pelly writing, "No music has ever sounded quite like it." My God, that is definitely a statement. For a long time, however, I hadn't given the album a listen. Recently, I decided to fix that. I gave it a spin, and I definitely have some thoughts. Today, I'm gonna share those thoughts. Let's cut to the chase. You might be wondering why it took me over 3 years to listen to the album. You see, when the album was first released and got all of its acclaim, I more or less got kind of tired of hearing about it constantly. Due to a certain something that happened in 2020, I was spending a lot of time indoors and on the internet. To be fair, I still do. And it seemed like everyone online was talking about the album. The final straw for me was when The Needle Drop gave it a 7 out of 10 and got torn to shreds by a good chunk of fans, even though the review as a whole was largely positive. Seeing that made me think, good God, enough about this album. Due to this, I intentionally didn't listen to it at first, mainly out of spite, which, in retrospect, I understand is a pretty petty thing to do. Eventually, the hype for the album kind of died down, people stopped talking about it as much, and I easily could have listened to it then, but I more or less just never got around to it. Recently, though, the allure of the album proved too much to ignore, and I finally gave in. Before I did that, though, I had to do a bit of preparation. You see, I had never actually listened to any Fiona Apple music. Those of you who have watched my other videos will know that I tend to drift toward rock and metal music, so Fiona's brand of piano-based pop didn't really seem like something I'd enjoy. Just to clarify, I definitely listen to music outside my comfort zone. Hell, my record collection has everything from Beastie Boys to Billie Eilish to John Coltrane. That being said, I had still just never felt much of a pull to listen to Fiona Apple before. For the sake of knowing what to expect for this album, however, I listened to her album before this, 2012's The Idler Wheel. I gotta say, I really liked this album. It didn't change my world or anything, but it was a really enjoyable listen. Fiona Apple definitely has a good singing voice, and while the songs are very much pop, the structure and lyrics are weird enough to where I was constantly intrigued as to what I'd hear next. Having had this experience, I went into Fetch the Bolt Cutters very much looking forward to what I'd hear. The album kicks off with I Want You to Love Me. The start of this song has a pretty interesting drum rhythm. I had a hard time counting the time signature, but I think it's 3/4. The vocals and piano eventually kick in, and I really like the way they sound. As I said, I find Fiona Apple's singing voice very pleasing to listen to. There's also a very cool acoustic bass line. Towards the end of the song, the piano goes all wild and Fiona's voice gets very high. Very cool. Shameika is a song that won the Best Rock Performance Grammy, and I definitely see why. The piano rhythm that starts the song is very groovy, and it pairs masterfully with the drums. Speaking of which, there are multiple percussion tracks on this song. There's obviously a normal drum set, but there's also what sound like handheld instruments, which really add layers. The chorus line, Shameika said I had potential, is quite catchy, and I quickly found myself mouthing along. Apparently, it's about a girl who comforted Fiona in school when the popular girls rejected her. Hey, we all need people like that. There are also multiple backing vocal tracks overlaid, judging by all of the oohs I could hear. I dug it quite a bit. Up next is a title track. I should probably mention by this point that Fiona said in interviews that she used a good deal of household items as percussion in place of actual instruments. I'm bringing this up now because this song clearly features quite a few wooden spoons and soup ladles. In terms of instruments that produce notes, there's a very cool melody that sounds like it's on a xylophone. Acoustic bass makes another appearance on this album, and thank God for that. There's a guest appearance by actress Cara Delevingne, who provides backing vocals. Speaking of singing, the chorus is quite catchy. Fiona has the ability to write a chorus that's just a single lyric repeated and make it still sound nice. The song ends with a sample of Fiona's dogs barking, a la Jane's Addiction. This song actually quotes Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill, which I wouldn't have noticed had I listened to the album when it first came out. Thank you, Stranger Things. Under the Table has a nice mix of piano and electric keyboards, which sound really nice and layered. The percussion on this one sounds nice, although I can't tell whether or not it's done with kitchen items or actual instruments. Oh well. The vocal hook of the song is quite catchy, and speaking of vocals, there's a part about halfway through where all the instruments cut out to let the singing shine. Then, all of the instruments come back in, and it's super satisfying. Cathartic, if you will. The lyrics of this song relate to female empowerment and not staying quiet in the face of sexism. Kick me under the table all you want, I won't shut up. The real-life inspiration was apparently a really snobby dinner party Fiona attended, at which she called out an offensive comment made by one of the guests, which she didn't regret even if it dimmed the mood a little bit. I should mention that feminism is one of this album's main themes, lyrically speaking. This is to be expected since Fiona has been a very vocal feminist for her entire career. Theme-wise, she said that this album is about not letting yourself be silenced and breaking free of oppression. The title comes from the TV series The Fall, the full quote being, "Fetch the fucking bolt cutters and get yourself out of the situation you're in." In addition, this album also discusses her complicated relationships with other women and her desire to not let the men of the world pit them against each other. As a man, I say, valid. Relay is probably my favorite song, if I'm being honest. For starters, household percussion makes a comeback, and it's awesome. Very upbeat and head-bopping inducing. What I mainly like about this title track is the chorus hook. Evil is a relay sport when the one who's burnt turns to pass the torch, is sung in such a groovy way, and it's such an earworm, and I had it in my head for the rest of the day. The line itself was written when Fiona was 15, and I admire her for holding onto it for so long until she found a song it would fit on. The song ends with some wordless high-pitched singing, and as much as I do like lyrics, sometimes you just gotta flex your pipes. Rack of His has a cool sounding melody that sounds like it's played on a children's toy keyboard. I know that sounds strange, but listen to the song yourself and you'll see what I mean. The acoustics on the drums sound interesting. It's almost as if they were recorded in a separate room, like a living room. It definitely sounds pretty cool. I found the title for the song a bit interesting since rack is usually used to refer to women's bodies. According to Genius, this subversion is intentional. The rack in question is also revealed to be a guitar stand belonging to her ex, which Fiona goes on to compare herself to as just another object that's been used by him. Newspaper starts off with some more dog barking samples. Instrumentally, this song is very sparse. There's just Fiona's vocals, overlaid backing, oohs, and percussion. Fiona really brings it on this track. The percussion sounds very full, which is quite nice. One thing I noticed I couldn't help but fixate on was in the second half, when there's what sounds like slap bass in the background. It's definitely not what I was expecting, but hey, who am I to complain about sick bass? The lyrics for the song are pretty interesting. The Genius page doesn't have any annotations, but it's pretty easy to figure out what Fiona is singing about. Oh, I too just wanted him to be proud of me, and then I just wanted to make amends. I wonder what lies he's told you about me to make sure we'll never be friends. Ladies starts out with just singing and drums, and the drum sounds slightly out of time, although that could just be me. I definitely do like it as it kept me on my toes. Eventually a keyboard melody comes in, and it sounds pretty peaceful. I couldn't help but smile when I first heard it. Fiona's singing in the song reaches some pretty high registers. As a baritone, I'm envious. This song is based on not wanting to fight with the ex-girlfriends of a man you once dated, which relates to the general theme of women not letting men pit them against each other. Heavy Balloon has a really nice percussion line that had me nodding my head almost immediately. Fiona once again gives it her absolute all, so you can hear the emotion in her voice. What I find most intriguing about the song are the lyrics. Fiona has said that the song is about depression, but she definitely uses some interesting metaphors to get this across. Chorus mentions strawberries, peas, and beans. It makes sense that this album was recorded at Fiona's home studio, since these lyrics make me envision her looking around a kitchen and getting lyrical inspiration. In actuality, this song was apparently inspired by a children's book about vegetables. Whatever, I'm sticking with my theory. Cosmonauts has some very interesting sounding percussion starting things off, so it's good to see the wooden spoons and soup ladles making a comeback. There's another combination of piano and electric keyboard, and at this point I was wondering how Fiona was going to play this live with only 2 hands. I found it a little interesting how Fiona chose to name this song after the Soviet spacemen, since the Americans were simply called astronauts. I will admit, Cosmonauts sounds a whole lot cooler. For Her has a nice clapping beat at the beginning. I guess that's the one form of percussion more simple than kitchen utensils. There are many vocal tracks layered here, and they harmonize each other in a very satisfying way. The chorus is very nice and up-tempo with really well done drums. The lyrics are centered around a woman addressing her male abuser, and they're some of the most explicit on the album. This was based on an experience of a friend of Fiona's whose permission she obtained in order to use it. Drumset, as the name implied, does seem to have an actual drum set, not just kitchen utensils. What's interesting is that there doesn't appear to be any piano on this song. It's really just Fiona's singing accompanied by percussion. There does seem to be a slight melody, but I can't really tell what it's played on. The album's final track, On I Go, starts out with an interesting percussion track paired with Fiona singing a really catchy line. Once the chorus comes around, there's what sounds like distorted guitar in the background, although according to the credits on Wikipedia, there's no guitar on the track. Whatever, I heard what I heard. The percussion on this track is layered really heavily, and as a result, it sounds enormous. Definitely a good note to end the album on. So what are my thoughts on this album after giving it a spin? I gotta say, I had a really good time listening to it. Fiona Apple really impressed me with her songwriting abilities. She manages to fit in a lot of hooks while also keeping things weird enough. Would I say it's a 10 out of 10? Honestly, I don't know. On one hand, I can't think of anything I necessarily disliked about the album. On the other hand, it's difficult to explain. I enjoyed listening to the album a great deal, but I didn't exactly walk away from it thinking, holy cow, that was good. In order for me to say that an album is a 10 out of 10, it has to be more than just lacking bad features. It has to have that extra oomph to it, quality-wise, and I just didn't get that from this. However, this is not at all a flaw with the album per se. Just because it wasn't a 10 out of 10 for me, doesn't mean it wasn't a 10 out of 10 for many other people. My enjoyment of the album was almost certainly impacted by 2 big factors. One, as I said earlier, while I do enjoy Fiona Apple's music, I will admit to being somewhat of a novice to it as a whole. Obviously, I enjoy all sorts of music that's out of my comfort zone, but being basically a first-time listener meant that the odds of me thinking that it's a 10 out of 10 right off the bat are pretty slim. If I'd been listening to her for years already, I'd probably think different. 2, as you might be able to tell, I'm a guy. Therefore, a lot of the lyrics regarding female empowerment didn't really resonate with me the way they would if I were a woman. Like, yeah, I think the lyrics are really well written, but at the same time, I can't really relate to any of them. Had I been a woman who was already a fan of Fiona Apple, I can totally see me giving this a 10 out of 10. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Fiona Apple's Fetch the Bolt Cutters. I'd be interested in hearing what you guys think about this and whether or not you agree with my takes on it. If you're like me from a month ago and haven't listened to this album, give it a shot. I think you'll find it worthwhile. I certainly did. If you're still watching by now, I just want to say thank you so much for giving me your time. If you like what you saw, be sure to like and hit subscribe. I upload videos whenever I can. I always have a ton of fun making them, and hopefully you have as much fun watching them. If you have an idea for a video, leave it down in the comments below. Who knows, maybe I'll get to it. I'm RobbyJ2734. I will see you when I see you next.